Hey there, and welcome back to Baldur's Gate 3. My name is Pete, and today we complete another chapter in the story of Sylvia Harryfoot, the Dark Urge halfling bard who is at the center of this Honuor Mode walkthrough. Last time we left off, about a year ago actually, after recruiting a party of adventurers, the warrior Lae'zel and the cleric Shadowheart, both of whom we already met on board of the Mind Flayer's Nautiloid, as well as the rogue Astarion and the wizard Gale. Exploring and fighting our way across a beach ravaged by the Nautiloid's crash, we came across some overgrown ruins. After fighting off the looters surrounding the place, we now find ourselves in front of the entrance to whatever lies inside the old building. However, before we go inside, we want to level up. You may now be asking yourselves how, since we currently don't have a level up available, so let's head to camp for the first time and change that. Our party's camp is accessible at all times as long as we are not in combat, and it is where we can chat to our companions, store items in the party chest, and take long rests. To get us started, we only want to do 2 out of those 3 things, and we also only want to talk to one particular person, Shadowheart.
Lae'zel has a dangerous look in her eyes. Let's just hope she reserves those impulses for any common foes.
Now, Shadowheart's still not entirely keen on traveling with Lae'zel. Sadly, we cannot comment on that any further. Instead, let's ask her about that artifact she's been keeping, and which has so far not really been explained.
There's no story. None that you're entitled to hear, anyway. Just forget you ever saw it.
Right, again, no further inquiry possible. So up next, let's talk about the very serious issue of memory loss.
I understand why you ask, but memory loss is not as uncommon as you'd think. There may be other causes.
At this point then, we have already reached the more generic dialogue options, and let's actually ask to get to know each other a little better first.
Must we? No harm in a little mystery, don't you think?
Now this one we can follow up on and press for a little more info, but we're not going to. Instead, showing ourselves empathetic will earn us a bit of approval from Shadowheart.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll get along perfectly well.
Finally, let's ask about her opinion on recent events. This is the important one we need to explore in order to gain a few XP.
We haven't gone all that far yet. What are you referring to exactly?
Here we want to ask about her plans for the future, but first let's pick option 1 and inquire about the tadpoles in our brains.
Must I? Thinking about it won't help. We know what to do, so let's do it. Find a way to rid ourselves of these things. I'm not too hopeful that a Gith crash will actually prove our salvation, but worth keeping in mind.
And now we can find out what Shadowheart plans to do should we manage to get rid of the tadpoles.
I suppose we'd go our separate ways.
Not a slight on your company, of course.
And once again, let's show ourselves sympathetic, even though this time we do not gain approval. After all, not everyone needs to feel Sylvia Harryfoot's dark urges.
Perhaps. Perhaps not. If we do survive, we'll have separate lives to return to. I need to get to Baldur's Gate. There's someone waiting for me there. Someone I have to reach. As soon as possible.
And you saw it in the top left, this just updated her quest and gained us XP. Now let's leave her in peace and not inquire further. Don't worry, pestering her for more info would not reveal anything either.
Thank you. And you're right. It's a delicate matter. Not something for light conversation.
Last but not least, we can now ask for a brief assessment of our leadership skills. So far at least, our dark urges have not been too prominently featured.
I must admit, you've been a surprise. And not an unpleasant one. Kindred spirits are few and far between for me. Besides, you saved my life aboard the Nautiloid. How can I do anything but sing your praises?
Well, that sounds like the start of a lovely friendship, or maybe even more. At this point, we actually also want to have Shadowheart return to the team, as we will need her for what comes next.
I'd join you, but things are looking a tad crowded. You'll need to make room for me.
Sitting out this next bit will be our wizard Gale, but not for too long. He'll be back for the second half of this episode.
Wonderful. I was beginning to feel a little left out.
Right then, here we are. We have gained 30 XP for revealing a bit more about Shadowheart's personal quest, enough to advance our entire party to level 3. So let's get to it. Level 3 is a big one for most of our party, as it allows us to select a subclass, and that's where things really start to get interesting. Full disclosure, the footage for this video does not yet include the new subclasses from patch 8, but don't worry, even with those I would have made the same choices. We start off with Sylvia herself, who by default is put into the College of Lore. This subclass excels at spellcasting and debuffing enemies, and boasts the widest spell selection. I would prefer to show off a bit more versatility though, so perhaps College of Valor. This subclass focuses a bit more on survivability, with access to shields and medium armor, and expands the utility of Bardic Inspiration to boost our allies. Still, it's not exactly a subclass that makes Sylvia herself that much more powerful in combat, which is why we are going for College of Swords. This subclass allows us to use Bardic Inspiration to boost our own abilities, and it also gives us medium armor proficiency. College of Swords also allows Sylvia to pick a fighting style, and we're going with 2-weapon fighting over dueling here. The damage potential is just a bit higher, and I think wielding 2 weapons emphasizes the violent Dark Urge side of her character. At this point, we also gain expertise, essentially allowing us to double our proficiency bonus for 2 select skills, and we want to make a slight change here, switching out performance in favor of persuasion, which in my experience is simply used a bit more often and a staple of the Bard class. Finally then, we unlock 2nd level spells, and as usual I won't go over all the options here. We will select Cloud of Daggers, a very useful damage spell that can deal continuous damage in an area, very handy to block off choke points. Using the Replace spell option we get each level up, we can also grab a second level spell by removing Tasha's Hideous Laughter from our spell list and replacing it with Heat Metal. I know this gets rid of an iconic Bard spell, but Heat Metal is fantastic against enemies wearing metal weapons and armor, and not only deals damage but also gives disadvantage on attack and ability rolls. And here we are, Sylvia Harryfoot's a level 3 Swords Bard, ready for the next chapter. The remaining level ups will be a little faster. Astarion is up next. He's put into the Arcane Trickster subclass by default, which would unlock spells for him, but I think this does not really emphasize the rogue's strengths. Assassins meanwhile excel at striking first and hard. They're the masters of burst damage, but that's really all they do. That's why we're going with Thief. This subclass unlocks a 2nd bonus action each turn to be used on an extra attack or on hiding, dashing or disengaging. Also capable of delivering lots of damage, but overall very versatile. You may see a trend emerge here. Up next is Lae'zel, and for a change we will stick with the Battlemaster subclass. Eldritch Knight would give her spells, but again not really the fighter's focus. Champions meanwhile are simply a bit boring in my opinion. They have an increased chance to crit, but that's essentially it. Not saying that's not potentially powerful, it's just a bit one-dimensional. Battlemaster meanwhile gives us superiority die to be used on these so-called maneuvers. Again, lots of versatility here. We can only select 3 though, and we're going with Trip Attack to make enemies go prone, which then would give us advantage on attack rolls against them. We are also selecting Riposte, a free counterattack whenever an enemy misses us with one of their attacks. Overall, a nice boost to Lae'zel's damage potential. And finally, Menacing Attack for when we need a target to be frightened, useful for controlling isolated powerful enemies. And don't worry, we can change all of these later. Finally then, it's Shadowheart, no subclass for her, as clerics select those at level 1, but as a Trickery domain cleric, Shadowheart gains 2 2nd level spells for free here, Mirror Image and Pass Without a Trace, both situationally useful. In addition, we can use this moment to prepare a new spell set. Clerics always have access to the entire spell list. For now, we only kick out Command and replace it with Spiritual Weapon, which can be cast with only a bonus action, but gives us a nice boost to the action economy. However, as a cleric, Shadowheart can change her list of prepared spells at any moment outside of combat. And there we are. We'll take care of Gale once he returns to the party in a little while. For now, let's make use of Sylvia's new medium armor proficiency and give her a scale mail to bump her armor class from 14 up to 16. We also collected a floppy hat last episode. Let's equip that too for a slightly more stylish appearance. Finally, since Sylvia can now fight with 2 weapons, we will also switch from wielding 1 rapier to wielding 2 scimitars, a rather menacing look in the hands of a small halfling. The potential damage per weapon now decreases, but overall Sylvia will be able to deal more damage since she can now attack both with her main and her offhand. Over here in the corner, right next to Shadowheart's tent, we can then also find the Traveler's Chest, where we can safely store anything that would otherwise just clog up our inventory. As you can see, we have been carrying plenty of spare weapons and armor that we really don't need for this next part of the adventure. Speaking of which, it is now time to leave the camp and finally get on with it. I think we are well prepared to explore the interior of the ruins and find out just how abandoned they really are.
Everything all right out there?
Right, looks like the looters have already ventured inside too. Gimblebock was one of the guys we eliminated last time, but whoever's inside does not know that, and with a successful performance check we can hopefully keep it that way. The DC of 5 is in fact impossible to fail for us unless we roll a 1.
You sound a bit shaken, boss. Hang on while I find the key.
And there we go. Door's been unlocked. Let's head inside.
Who the hell? You're dead!
And unsurprisingly, as soon as we do, the ruse is revealed, but we gain surprise against our lone opponent, who now won't be able to act for one entire turn. His 23 hit points should hopefully be gone by the time he can do something. Let's begin with a 2-weapon attack from Sylvia. 1 hit, 1 miss, 7 points of damage. Up next, we have Astarion, who's wielding 2 short swords. Let's see what he can do with them. Alright, no sneak attack and still we get the kill. Lovely, that's 15 more XP. And we can now loot the room, starting with the looter himself. The key here unlocks the door we just came through. The rest is not really anything of use, but of course we'll grab it anyway.
Who are those prayers for? Normally the patron god is obvious. Not here.
Now, for the most part, the rest of the area does not hold too many items of value or interest. There are plenty of bookshelves, and books have a decent value to weight ratio, at least in the early game, so we'll grab all of them, but the main loot is on the table here. First, we have the looter's trunk containing some gold and trinkets, and second, there's several food items on the table that we want to pick up, the most important one being the supply pack. This food will be needed to have a proper long rest. On Tactician and Honuor Mode, the food requirements for long rests are actually doubled, so anything our party can eat or drink is very valuable to us. Eventually then, with everything collected, we can make our way over to the door leading into the next area, a door that, with a bit of patience, we can hear some voices behind.
See anything?
Nothing.
All clear.
At this point, I think it's clear that those voices do not belong to friendlies, so let's set up a nice ambush here. First things first, let's turn on the fires and have Shadowheart cast Bless on everyone but herself. Then we want to go into stealth mode and wait for 6 seconds, the length of 1 turn. Once that time has passed, we enter turn-based mode. Shadowheart has now regained her action, and we can now take positions to the left and right of the door. From here, Lae'zel can pull the lever and everyone can dip their weapons in fire. We're going with the ranged weapons for now, and then we end the turn.
Any others doing up there?
Maybe we should go take a look.
Not a chance. Could be a trap. Just keep your eyes peeled.
The door now opens as a result of pulling the lever, and we can take a look at what's behind. 5 enemies who have thankfully not spotted us yet, with 2 of them standing conveniently close to an oil barrel. Now, this is where things get a bit finicky. We kick things off with Sylvia, who can now cast Fairy Fire. The radius is just large enough to hit all 5 enemies. Sadly, only 2 of them fail their saving throw, but all of them are now surprised, and Sylvia has just entered the initiative order. Importantly though, the rest of our team has not, and has therefore also been kicked out of turn-based mode. So we need to quickly re-enter that mode with Astarion, Lae'zel and Shadowheart. And we will need to repeat this every time we now reveal one of them to the enemies, until everyone has officially joined the fight. With Miss Harryfoot, meanwhile, we can use her movement and her bonus action to jump to get us into melee range with the enemy archer here, and then we switch to Lae'zel. Still hidden, she can now move in and get herself detected, once again prompting us to re-enter turn-based mode with the remaining two. Lae'zel has also entered the initiative order, but it's not her turn yet, so let's proceed with Shadowheart, who can now use her Firebolt cantrip to blow up the oil barrel. Alright, wonderful. Big explosion here that immediately kills one of the enemies, severely hurts another, and also deals some decent damage against the 32 hit point enemy down here. That enemy is now also going to be the target of a ranged sneak attack from Astarion. He attacks from hiding, so he gets advantage on the roll. With the extra fire damage, we deal a grand total of 14 points of damage, and finally everyone has officially joined the fight. Keeping turn-based mode intact is important here prior to this fight, so that everyone retains the benefits of Bless, as well as their dipped weapons. Now at this point, we need to end Sylvia's turn to kickstart the initiative order, which immediately jumps to Astarion and Lae'zel, since all enemies are surprised. Gaining that surprise round is, in my opinion, the most crucial aspect when it comes to winning this fight. Without it, a 5-on-4 combat encounter on Honuor Mode has the potential to do some serious damage. Now, Astarion has of course already used his action, but he's still got a bonus action with which he can take an offhand attack against the archer here. That deals 11 points of damage. Yes, it is treated as another sneak attack because of the advantage from Fairy Fire. Both ranged and melee sneak attacks are limited to 1 per turn, but you can get both. With his second bonus action we take another stab, but this one misses, so let's move up and end the turn to jump to Lae'zel. She's got a 75% hit chance with the Everburn Blade, and apparently that's enough. With that, the toughest enemy in the group has now been eliminated, but we're not done. Her remaining movement gets her into melee range with the archer, where we can now activate Action Surge for a second action, another strike, another kill. And just like that, there were only 2 and they're still surprised, so we proceed with Shadowheart. Her action has already been used on the Firebolt, and there are no bonus actions that would be worth using at this point, so we just move her up as far as possible and end the turn. That begins a new round. From now on our enemies can actually attack, best if we do not let it come to that, and with 2 attacks Sylvia should be able to handle this one remaining hit point here. Lovely, and that once again leaves the enemy under the effects of Fairy Fire for Astarion, who will therefore be able to get a sneak attack due to having advantage. 15 hit points, no trouble for our rogue, and just like that the fight is over, and we have not taken as much as a single point of damage. Now begins the fun part. Let's loot the place. Our fallen enemies mostly just carry weapons and other combat items, some poison, thieves' tools, alchemist's fire, and a scroll of burning hands. Definitely a worthwhile haul. Importantly, there's also a second set of thieves' tools over on the floor by the door here, and there's also one more body to loot if we go through the door on the other side. This body belongs to one of the looters from above. You may recall that we dumped a big rock on them and one fell through the hole that was created that way. More weapons, thieves' tools, and a trap disarm kit. That one we want to hold on to while we pillage the rest of the room, but there's really not a whole lot here except for a few clothing items and books. In this little side passage next to where the archer previously stood, there is a vase containing an ancient scroll with a decent value to weight ratio, but that's about it. Time to investigate that one door we haven't used yet.
No lock, no handle. How does it open?
Looks like we need to find an opening mechanism, and luckily there is one more room to explore. This one gives off a lovely, eerie atmosphere. It is once again stuffed with bookshelves. Again, we're going to empty them all just to be able to sell them later. Then a rustic chest by the statue here promises more loot, but in fact has nothing inside it. What we can take, however, are the chapel records, while the plaque remains unreadable.
You do not recognize the language on the plaque.
Still no sign of a mechanism to open the door though, But there is one more chest behind the statue, and not only does this one contain a few, albeit not too valuable items, right next to it we can also spot a hidden lever. Well, I think it's obvious what that did, and we can see it for ourselves just a few moments later. The previously locked door is now open. On the other side of it, there is a candle holder that can be used to open and shut the door as well, but our destination lies beyond the next, thankfully unlocked door at the other end of the room. Going through, we now find ourselves in a Dank Crypt and earn 10 XP for making it here. The room we currently stand in does not appear to have anything overly noteworthy in it. Meanwhile, there are big heavy oak doors to the left and right. Before we go through, however, there is something to loot. Right by the entrance, hidden in the darkness, a chest holds 3 scrolls of protection from evil and good. Not only that, on the other side a similar chest can be found, this one containing a ring, and there is a third chest in the top right corner, once again hidden in the shadows, containing some trinkets. I think it also becomes quite clear at this point that the looters have not progressed this far. So then, let's take the door on our right first, leading into a room that we can quickly perceive to be trapped.
Traps? How considerate.
The vent in front of us won't do anything if we just step on it, but it might be triggered by something else. Perhaps you can already tell what that is. Yes, indeed, the grand sarcophagus in the middle of the room appears to be trapped as well, although there is actually a button on the pillar here that might be of use should we trigger the trap.
The text on the plaque is a mystery to you.
Now, with the plaque on the sarcophagus not telling us anything further, let's see about getting at its contents, and this is where we want to use Astarion. As a rogue, he's got the highest bonuses to disarming traps. The DC is only 10, but let's pump a guidance in there nonetheless. Now anything but a natural 1 will succeed. And there we go, trap disarmed, and we can safely open the sarcophagus to reveal a magic spear that grants its wielder advantage on the next attack if the previous one missed. Very useful for someone who's maybe not so adept at constantly landing attacks, although for now we will not equip it with anyone. The engraved key also of some importance, and there is plenty more loot in the room, most notably in the other smaller sarcophagi. A silver band and a suit of ringmail heavy armor in this one. Then there's a chest by the door containing various useful items, as well as 2 more sarcophagi on the other side here. One has a warhammer and a shield inside, the other one a mysterious soul coin and a heavy 2-handed maul.
Strange coin. I wonder what it's worth.
Now this maul is actually of some interest to us. We want to give it to Lae'zel to at least temporarily replace the Everburn blade. Yes, it doesn't do quite as much damage, but it deals bludgeoning damage. Let's just keep that in mind for now. Just for the sake of completion, we are also going to pick the door leading out of the room. This one has a DC of 15, but with all the bonuses Astarion gets and another charge of guidance, it shouldn't be too difficult to open. This door leads back out to the ravaged beach. We've actually been here before in the last episode, and you can pick this door from the other side too to bypass the big fight earlier, although picking it from this side comes with a DC of 20. Now, the sarcophagus room has been thoroughly explored at this point. Before we continue through the other heavy oak door though, let us quickly head to camp again. Now, as you can see, your party's camp adapts to where you currently are. Still, even in this version, it works exactly as before. And so, let us now talk to Gale.
A Githyanki joining our company.
Not a collaboration I'd have anticipated, but a welcome one nonetheless.
With him, we will not explore any of the dialogue options yet. Instead, we simply tell him to join us.
I'd be delighted, though someone else will need to watch the cookpot, of course.
And staying in camp will now be Astarion.
Magical. So, shall we?
We shall, but not before leveling him up. Don't worry, this will only take a second. The only thing he gains are level 2 spell slots, and with those we will pick, first, Scorching Ray, a high damage fire spell that can be targeted at multiple enemies, and second, Misty Step, a bonus action spell that essentially serves as short-range teleportation, very useful to increase Gale's mobility. We now also need to prepare those 2 spells to have access to them. Leaving the list of prepared spells will therefore be Thunderwave and Sleep, which won't be particularly useful, at least not anytime soon. For a little added protection, we can also give Gale some light armor without restricting his use of magic, and he can even equip a shield in his offhand to bump his armor class up to a respectable 14. Following that, we now want to take a short rest for the sole purpose of refreshing Lae'zel's action surge. Nothing else is gained from doing this, but this ability alone is worth it in my opinion. And just like that, we can now return to the Dank Crypt and proceed through the second set of doors, using those keys we just found in the sarcophagus. We then find ourselves in a room that definitely deserves the Crypt moniker, complete with skeletons on the floor.
Armed scribes, but no sign of a struggle.
The bones are intact. Would not scavengers have disturbed them?
Well, Sylvia and Shadowheart make good points here. Something seems off about these skeletons. Among other things, they are all armed, a fact that we quickly want to change by taking everything they have on them. To the east here, the wall has also given way to a passage leading into some sort of underground cavern. We'll keep that in mind, but let's explore and loot further.
That's Jurgle, scribe of the dead. I don't think anyone still worshipped him.
Sylvia and Shadowheart pass religion checks here to identify the big statue as Jurgle, scribe of the dead, a name that, too, we shall keep in mind. Now, after looting one final skeleton body and finding one more gilded chest in the corner here, we want to take note of a curious button placed on the side of the wall with Jurgle's statue in front of it. However, before pressing it, we want to go through a small wooden door on the side here, and this is the part for which we took Gale with us.
Looks like someone wanted to bury their secrets.
Indeed, there is something rather valuable in this room, and no, I am not talking about the contents of the chest here, or even the second soul coin found in the sarcophagus. I'm talking about the Book of Dead Gods. Like I said, this book is why we have Gale with us. First of all, Gale has the highest intelligence modifier of anyone in the party at +3. Nobody else even gets close to that. In addition, Gale also has the highest bonus to religion checks at a +3. No one else has higher than a +2. Finally, Gale also has the highest bonus to investigation checks with +5. Again, only Lae'zel gets even remotely close with a +2. And this unique skill set makes him the perfect candidate to interact with the book.
This book is far lighter than it should be with such a massive lock.
Right, as a wizard, Gale gets a special skill check option here that is a little easier to succeed at. Clerics get this too, but overall Shadowheart is not quite as well suited for this. Not to mention that we also need her for guidance, and to make extra sure we will also use the first of 3 bardic inspirations. The DC here is 10, with the other checks it would have been 15.
the lock opens, a loose page comes with it. Magic pulses from the parchment. What was once script is now an obliterated scrawl. You have a sense these are names, a list. But of what?
Here then, the religion check. This is the important one. So once again, we will boost this as much as we can.
Gods. These are the names of gods, once lost but now restored after the Second Sundering. The last three names in this book sit close together, but are so devastated by the scroll as to be unreadable. Entire pantheons have dwindled and been reborn, silently recorded by this book.
And there we go. Thanks to succeeding on a passive investigation check, we learn of 3 unreadable names in the book. However, it was the religion check that has now granted both Gale and Shadowheart inspiration, as well as giving us a Ray of Enfeeblement scroll, with which we can weaken strength-based attacks from enemies. Now, with that taken care of, let's head back to the central chamber. That button still needs to be pressed, but, well, the overall ambience here definitely alludes to that having consequences. So we stay on the high grounds with everyone but Lae'zel, who can then interact with the button to trigger a cutscene that would otherwise not play if we did this from afar with, let's say, Mage Hand.
That's curious.
So, hardly a surprise, I would say, to see all of those skeletons rise and become hostile. Luckily, we already took all their gear, leaving them somewhat lacking in options. That's especially important with the 41 hit point warrior, who without a weapon can't really do much. So, let's get to it. We've got one scribe here that keeps us from accessing Shadowheart in the initiative order. It should be possible to take them out though with a magic missile from Gale, upcast to 2nd level for an extra d4 damage, and the beauty, magic missile always hits. Lovely, that's the first of 5 enemies down, and Shadowheart can now act freely in the initiative order with the rest of the party. We also immediately want to make use of that, but first we need to move Lae'zel into range, then we can cast Bless with Shadowheart on everyone but Gale. With magic missile always hitting, he doesn't need it. Using a 2nd level spell slot and Shadowheart's bonus action, we can then also cast Spiritual Weapon. We can choose here from different weapon types, and this choice is actually important. We want to go with the Maul and place it right next to the warrior. Why the Maul? Well, because even in its spiritual form, this weapon deals bludgeoning damage, and that's the one damage type that all these skeletons here are vulnerable to, meaning all bludgeoning damage is doubled. That is also why Lae'zel is wielding a maul instead of the Everburn blade. Sylvia, meanwhile, is wielding 2 scimitars, and with 2 95% hit chances, she should hopefully be able to take care of the scribe closest to us. Wonderful, that leaves us now with Lae'zel as the only one who hasn't acted, and we want to keep her in the back here, which means ranged attack. We can spend one of her 4 superiority dice to make this either a trip or a menacing attack. The first would be a strength, the other a wisdom save, and looking at the skeleton warrior's stats here, the menacing attack is clearly the better choice. Only a 55% hit chance, but it lands. The warrior fails the save and is now frightened, meaning it can't move any closer. So let's end the turn and watch what the rest of the skeletons do. The first one here has to waste the entire turn on dashing, since we have kept a distance. The other one, meanwhile, is in range to cast Fog Cloud, no damage dealt though, and easy to move out of. The warrior, meanwhile, can still attack, but only with a weak stone throw. 2 points of damage against the spiritual weapon, which can easily take that. In turn, the maul is now up next and can try a concussive smash against the enemy. Once again, that connects, but the constitution save succeeds, so the warrior is not dazed. Still, this all looks very manageable to me. Let's keep going with a guiding bolt from Shadowheart, not necessarily for the damage, but to get advantage on the next attack. Thanks to Bless and the High Ground, that lands and already brings us to Lae'zel, who will now be the beneficiary of this advantage, closing the distance with a jump and run, and then hammering away at the warrior with a trip attack. The enemy is already frightened. Let's see if we can also knock it prone. Or, well, we could also simply deal 44 points of damage with a single hit, thanks to that bludgeoning vulnerability, and take the warrior out. Absolutely lovely. That leaves us now with only the two scribes. The first one here will be Sylvia's target, who can now use her last bardic inspiration on a ranged slashing flourish, allowing her to attack two enemies, or, and this is extremely handy, the same enemy twice. And, well, with double crits, the scribe does not stand a chance. 2 regular hits probably would have sufficed too, though. For the final enemy then, we once again call upon Gale to cast a 2nd level magic missile. It has worked once, let's hope it works twice. Alright, pretty poor damage here, and the scribe is left standing. Of course, we can't have that, but luckily we took that short rest earlier and can now action surge with Lae'zel once more to give her another action to be used on a crossbow attack that hopefully finds and kills the target.
Corpses are better fighters than many who draw breath in this world. Curious.
Let's have a look at the loot. It isn't for your pockets only.
And there we go, all 5 skeletons defeated in 2 turns. And once again, we have not taken a single point of damage, unless you want to count the spiritual weapon. Now, time to investigate what lies beyond the door we just opened. Basic level design principles would suggest that we find something very interesting in here.
A lot of effort to hide one sarcophagus.
And yes, indeed, one large sarcophagus in here. This one apparently not trapped. Before we open it though, let's loot the chest over here, containing our very first rare magic item, the Amulet of Lost Voices, an amulet that lets us cast Speak with Dead once per long rest. As our protagonist, it will of course be Sylvia who equips this, and then we can take a closer look at the sarcophagus.
Here lies the guardian of tombs. Through knowledge comes atonement.
So he has spoken, and so thou standest before me, right as always. What a curious way to awaken. Now, I have a question for thee. What is the worth of a single mortal's life?
Right, so we have woken up another not entirely dead figure here. Withers is his name. Although being buried in a tomb that has a statue of Jurgle outside of it, there might be more to him. Either way, he's not attacking us, unlike the skeletons earlier, so let's find out why he seemingly does not mind being disturbed.
Because that would be senseless. Wilt thou answer my question?
And because attacking him would be pointless, he can in fact not be damaged or killed, we might as well.
So, I ask again, what is the worth of a single mortal life?
Now, we get plenty of possible answers here, although which option we pick does unfortunately not really matter. So, while we could lean into our dark urges or get philosophical, let us pick the class-specific option for the Bard, and hope that the legends will remember us fondly.
A life and how it is lived are different equations. Very well. I am satisfied. We have met, and I know thy face. We will see each other again at the proper time and place. Farewell.
Right, and this interaction gives Sylvia an inspiration, and just like that, Withers rises and walks away. Very importantly, we want to loot his sarcophagus now for a 3rd soul coin and some oils and elixirs, and then we can leave, only to find Withers still roaming around outside.
I should speak up.
So, let's have another brief chat with him.
We have nothing more to discuss. Continue on thy way, as if I were not here. I must attend this place after so many years away. We will see each other again soon.
And indeed, he seems very sure of what's going to happen, a fact that we can once again point out with the option tailored to our class, although the other 3 would have similar results.
The mechanics of fate would be difficult to explain to one such as thyself. Regardless, it will occur.
Okay, and that's all we can get out of him for the moment. Apparently we are going to meet again, so let's make our exit, taking the passage through that cavern. There's no loot to be found here, but a conveniently placed lever lets down a ladder, and climbing up brings us back to the ravaged beach. We already visited this spot last episode, and you can enter through here too after a DC 20 lockpicking check, allowing you to bypass pretty much the entire dungeon except for that last room. And there is one more way of entering the ruins, the hole in the floor here, left by the rock we shot down last time. However, dropping down here will likely have the 5 looters downstairs investigate the room you land in, so it is perhaps not ideal. At this point, we can now also use our Amulet of the Dead to speak to Gimblebock, leader of the looters. Normally, corpses won't speak to you if you killed them, but technically it wasn't us who killed him, but a rock falling onto him.
The corpse regards you lifelessly.
Now we can ask 5 questions here before the spell fades. We have a bit more to select from though, so we're mainly going to ask the more personal stuff instead of asking him about his people. We took care of those already after all.
Gimblebock. Thieving, looting, cutting throats wherever there's gold. Looting, chapel ruins. Some, but lower crypts locked. No, doesn't matter if his loot's good.
The spell's power wanes. You can ask no more questions.
Right, and it is another inspiration, this time for Gale, who seemingly enjoys talking to the dead, although we haven't really learned much. We can at this point recast the spell, but only Gimblebock is a viable target. You can sadly not talk to every single dead person you ever leave behind. But I'll make sure that we talk to those that have something interesting to share. For now though, let's return to camp and speak with our party to gain a bit more insight and approval. Up first, we have Lae'zel.
Chatter already, Tusky.
Plenty to talk about here apparently. Let's begin by asking about the Githyanki, even though the way we do so could perhaps be a little more tactful.
I expect I am your first.
Here we can in fact create our own backstory a bit, although there's no approval to be had for either option, So let's tell her that we have heard of but not seen any Githyanki so far.
Of course you haven't. They would have cut you from navel to neck. You are no less alien to me than I am to you. I know of your kind, but I do not often encounter them. That large, fleshy nose of yours looks like a mistake.
Right, getting personal it seems. Let's restrain ourselves from responding in kind and instead take it light-hearted.
Decadent then, lacking in economy, like so much of this world and its undisciplined people.
Following that, we can now ask her about mind flayers. It seems like the Githyanki have a little more experience with them than we do.
I understand much beyond your comprehension. More to the point, I know the cure for our condition. It is imperative we locate a creche. You do well to observe more and question less.
And while we already witnessed ceremorphosis on board of the Nautiloid, let's have Lae'zel go through the details for us once more. Doing so unlocks an important dialogue option.
Yes, in great detail. It starts with a fever and memory loss. Then you start to hallucinate. Your hair falls out and you bleed from every orifice. Your bones will change form. Your jaw will split to allow room for 4 great tentacles. All skin will turn to gore and be shed to reveal new flesh underneath. Then you have ceased to exist, and a mind flayer is born.
And here we can now gain some valuable early approval by showing ourselves resolute and confident that we will not suffer this fate.
Words forged in steel. May your actions express the same metal. We must find my kind and be rid of the parasite. It's as simple as that. The first symptoms should have long since started, though. That is what puzzles me.
And yes, indeed, the fact that we have not yet experienced any of this does perhaps inspire some hope.
Yes, if you give it no further thought. But anomalies lead to surprises. Bad surprises. Besides, what hasn't happened may yet come to pass.
Speaking of things that may or may not have happened, let's also ask about our memory loss. Perhaps a side effect of what we've been through.
Ceremorphosis takes all of you. Mind, body, soul. An ordinary tadpole would eat at your memories until they were lost to the void. But our tadpoles are far from ordinary. I wonder if another factor's in play.
Right, no definitive answers here, and that brings us to talking about our dark urges. Lae'zel seems like a person who might just understand what possesses Sylvia.
Many a good warrior savors the scent of blood in the air. There's no shame in a capricious murder now and again. Too many, though, and you waste energy and dull your weapon. My suggestion, attack with purpose and savor your kills. And if the urge proves too much, well, I'm sure we can find you a goblin or two to carve up.
Right, if not outright dismissive, she definitely does not make a big deal out of it. And that's all we can get out of her. Time to leave her be and speak to Gale next. Astarion and Shadowheart currently do not have anything to say to us.
How can I help?
With Gale, we can get right down to business and ask him a bit more about himself. He seems ever so slightly more inclined to share than Lae'zel.
Let's see. I hail from Waterdeep, City of Splendors. I am a wizard of considerable acclaim and scholar of exceptional accomplishment. I have a cat, a library, and a weakness for a good glass of wine. And if the mood takes me, I'm known to try my hand at poetry. There.
Right, all a bit superficial here, almost as if he's avoiding a real answer, but he won't get away that easily.
Certainly. That I have a great respect for privacy, for instance, especially my own.
Okay, crucial moment in this conversation. We can now attempt a wisdom check to peer into his mind, and we will do so. Call it morbid curiosity, but it might make sense to know who exactly we're traveling with. This is a DC 15 check, so definitely not guaranteed to succeed, even with our +1 bonus. Let's see if we get lucky.
For a split second, you see a swirl of untamed magic. Then his defenses drop like a portcullis.
Out! That was uncalled for.
Right, so had we failed that, we could have used inspiration, but we don't need to. Instead, it might be time to apologize, which conveniently also earns us back the 5 points of approval we just lost.
Not an eventuality I'm entirely unfamiliar with. Nevertheless, please don't try that again unless I invite you to.
At this point, we can ask him about our memory loss and our dark urges too. Let's begin with the memories.
Memory loss isn't usually a symptom of ceremorphosis. If it is, they've forgotten to write it down in any text I've read on the subject. Then again, our case isn't exactly usual. Perhaps whatever's causing our tadpoles to remain in stasis has also affected your mind. If ceremorphosis takes place, all trace of your former self will be subsumed into the Mind Flayer's hive. So, to still be here, if a mite forgetful, still a win in my book.
And just like Lae'zel, he doesn't really appear to make a big deal out of it. Let's see how he reacts to us sharing our violent thoughts.
We all have those from time to time. I once wished a most impure demise on a colleague of mine who bought the last remaining copy of Etheril's Enchiridion of Enchanting Easements. It's a first edition, too. As regards to your own morbid little fantasies, I'm sure they're nothing to worry about, so long as they remain fantasies.
And once again, a rather light-hearted take on the situation. It remains to be seen how well we can manage to keep those thoughts in the realm of fantasy. For now at least, we have talked to all companions who have something to say, but there is a visitor in camp, and not an entirely unexpected one.
We meet again, as predicted. I shall be here in thy camp, for whenever thou hast need of my services.
And with the situation being a bit more relaxed, perhaps we can now finally uncover more about Wither's identity.
There are many answers to that question. None are important.
Well, maybe he can at least share why he is able to talk, unlike the other skeletons we encountered so far.
Correct.
And I suppose asking him to elaborate further will only yield a similar result.
No.
Right, perhaps we might want to shift from asking about him to asking about what he actually does, starting with that book he was apparently sorting through just a moment ago.
Beyond mortal realms, there doth exist an amalgamation of spirits akin to thine own, ensnared by the treacherous cult of the Absolute, felled in its name. They bear great discontentment with their destiny. For a mere pittance of coin, I might summon the worthiest among them to lend aid to thy undertaking.
Okay, so it looks like Withers is capable of summoning hirelings, although this begs the question whether or not they would be joining us of their own free will.
Most willingly, forsooth. Their passions doth run deep for what hath been wrought upon them.
Yeah, this does all sound a bit like they may have their very own motives, so how can we be sure that we can trust them?
Suspicion always haunts the guilty mind. My services are all that I can proffer thee. What thou wilt do with them is for thee to undertake.
Right, sounds intriguing, but maybe there is more that Withers can offer.
Should thou or any of thy compatriots perish, I will cleave soul to body once more.
Okay, outright able to revive the dead, quite powerful magic, so how come he can wield it so easily?
Because it is my calling. There is little else to explain.
And yeah, about that cost he mentioned.
A matter of coin.
Right, 200 gold, that seems awfully transactional for a being like him, although I doubt complaining will change anything about it.
Such is life. Outrage leading to a singular end.
Alright then, in addition to summoning hirelings and reviving us, Withers can also be used to respec our character, and our party members too, something we might soon make use of. For now though, let's leave him be and finally end the day at the campfire here. This will trigger a transition to nighttime and allow us to have a long rest. Before we take that long rest, however, we want to talk to our party once more. Lae'zel is up first, but all of them have a few more lines to say to us.
A monster forms inside us, and you think to be idle. I knew your kind to be fragile, but I didn't foresee the severity. Be quick about your rest. We must locate a creche.
Understandably, she is pushing us to keep moving. Maybe we can persuade her to rest by appealing to her roots as a warrior.
A thick-headed notion in a complex circumstance. Do you suppose the parasites inside us dare to rest? That the Gale do not still pursue us with each peal of the bell? Take your rest. I will stand watch. Should a single tentacle split your skull, I will not hesitate to end you.
Right, determined as ever, and honestly, who can blame her? Up next, let's chat with Astarion.
Your Gith friend seems on edge. Mustn't relish the thought of sprouting tentacles. Understandable. Can't say I'm a fan either. It's just hard to join in when all of this feels so new. The night normally means bustling streets, bursting taverns. Curling up in the dirt and resting is, a little novel.
Once again, we will encourage him to rest. After all, he won't remain out of the active party for long.
I'm in no place to rest yet. Today has been a lot. I need some time to think things through. To process this. You sleep. I'll keep watch.
And we will thank him for that, to gain some approval, even though he might not necessarily be the most trustworthy soul we've met so far.
The pleasure is all mine. Sweet dreams.
Moving on then, we have Gale standing right by the campfire.
Go to hell.
And let's show our light-hearted side here again, to gain a bit of approval from him too.
Ha! You're a good sport. Go to hell. An everyday expression. So trivial it's almost meaningless. But we've seen hell. It's real. And it isn't trivial.
And yes, he seems a tad bit dejected, and perhaps now he's willing to share what's on his mind.
Devils, dragons, mind flayers. They used to be abstracts. Pictures on a piece of paper. What a difference a day makes. Now we have tadpoles slithering through our heads like carnivorous feti. That's not abstract.
Being the good leader we are, let us show ourselves optimistic, even though Gale is of course right about everything he just said.
That's the spirit. Let's be up with the lark. Find a healer before the wee one gets hungry.
And that leaves us only with Shadowheart, our final conversation of the day.
Doing the rounds, are you? You'd better get some rest. What were you two talking about?
And, well, that could really refer to any of the three conversations we just had, so we do need her to be a bit more specific.
You and that Gith Yankee.
Now, we won't go for any of the more evasive answers here, and it is true, we mainly just talked about the next steps, nothing conspiratorial about it.
I see. I'd be careful with Lae'zel.
And yes, as if it wasn't clear enough already, Shadowheart really does not trust Lae'zel, but instead of accusing her for it, let's try to find out why.
She's not of this world. I'd be surprised if our interests remained aligned. Let's hope we rapidly find a healer. You seem reliable. I think you know how important it is that we find someone who can cure us. Best if we focus on that.
And indeed, that's something we can agree with. Conveniently enough, that also earns us some more approval.
Good. We might even get lucky and find one right away. As I see it, we're overdue some good fortune. Rest well.
And there we are, with both Shadowheart and Gale approving from a distance. It is time to end the episode with our very first long rest. It is now up to us whether or not we assign the 80 supplies needed here. If we don't, we will only have a partial rest, restoring hit points and spell slots up to half of their maximum and not recharging short rests. Needless to say, we want to have a proper long rest at this point to replenish all of our combat resources. We will need them again soon enough. And there we are. It is a brand new morning and our party is ready for the next part of their adventure. I still don't want to promise a continuation of that adventure immediately, but recording this episode has definitely brought back that itch, so there's a good chance that the adventure of Sylvia Harryfoot continues in the not-so-distant future. For today, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, become a channel member or a Patreon supporter. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.